Hey kitschy cats and kittens, my name is Erica. Welcome to my studio. Hi everyone, welcome back. Today we are making this very cool Skully Ambient light. This is a 3-part mold, so it has a small, medium, and large skull to it. And I decided I wanted to make a night light for my bathroom. I have a lot of this sort of deep plum color in my bathroom, so I decided to use that in this light. The small skull will be the darkest and the largest skull will be the lightest. It doesn't actually turn out that way, but I still like how it turned out in the end. I mixed 3 colors of resin dye: purple, garnet, and black. So this is the inner skull, and I originally wanted to put the string lights in this, but they're actually quite long, as you'll see, so I decided against it. You can see that this has a ton of micro bubbles, and I actually have had issues with micro bubbles several times over the last like the last week. I think it's just too cold in my craft room right now, but I end up working with a bubble remover to take care of that. So here I am doing the second skull. The bubble remover and the curing machine I use are from a brand that I wouldn't recommend. They're not the most ethical company, and I'm not going to recommend anything from a company that doesn't have good ethics. Here I am, popping bubbles. But I do recommend Let's Resin, which has a bubble remover and a curing machine. I end up using this bubble remover on a 5-minute cycle and then another 9-minute cycle. You can see here that it's starting to work. I still have quite a few bubbles. That's what happens when you release the pressure. I didn't want to run it through again because this resin had already been sitting for a while. The bubbles popping at the top look so cool. I just sat there and stared at it for a while.
Wow, man.
And you can see here that I have pre-coiled the light string. Super helpful. I would definitely recommend that. I don't know why I just kept using the alcohol for the bubbles. If I'd used my heat gun, as I do later, it would have turned out much better. I'm pouring the resin, and I'm trying to do it slowly and carefully because I have several inclusions in this, which are going to be great places for bubbles to hide. I'm really trying to minimize the bubbles because these are transparent pores, so the micro bubbles are pretty obvious. Now, what normally happens is if you have micro bubbles on something and you put it in another layer of resin, that layer of resin fills in those little holes. That did not happen for me in this pour. I still don't really know why that didn't happen, but it didn't. To prevent the smaller skull from floating, I attached it to a popsicle stick with poster tack, and then I put a silicone mold over it that was flat and a couple jars on it to weigh it down. This worked really well. I was worried about the poster tack not coming out, but it did for the most part. There was a little scrape, but not much. This pour turned out much better than the other one with the micro bubbles as far as that goes, but you can still see all the micro bubbles in the smaller skull, and I noticed you can't tell it's a skull, it just looks like a blob. It still looks really cool, but I'm not done. This is going to go in a third larger mold. I was confident about my third pour at this point. The resin fairies were not on my side, however. So I want this to be even lighter. As you can see, the layers are getting lighter as I go. If I were to do this again, I would have done just the mid-size skull, and I would have done it in the color I did it, that sort of hue. And then I would have done the outside skull super, super light. The outer skull definitely should have been much, much lighter, maybe almost clear. So resin had started to get hot, so I decanted it into 2 different cups, but it's still full of bubbles, so I'm gonna go ahead and use my bubble machine again. And I just put both cups side by side. They just barely fit. Woohoo, I used my heat gun this time. So anyhow, I'm pouring this, and so far so good. There are bubbles in it still, and I don't know if you can see in the plastic cups I'm using, they kind of get trapped around the edges on the bottom, so I have to be wary of that. But it's still okay. Still pouring, it's working. Until now. You're not supposed to be able to see the resin that you've poured in. At this point, I was really confused. They were both from the same cup, mixed the same amount of time. This was sort of baffling, so I thought maybe I hadn't mixed it well enough. So I went ahead and mixed what was already in the skull and mixed what was left in the cup, which, as you can imagine, introduced bubbles again that I had worked so hard to take away. The skull keeps going crooked. It's listing to one side. So I end up trying to adjust it by adjusting the lollipop stick. Big mistake. In doing so, I think I loosened the popsicle stick from the poster tack. To be truthful, it didn't stick very well. I mean, it worked, but it was sort of tenuous at best to begin with. And then I loosened it. So then I poured, and I poured too much, and it was spilling out under the popsicle stick. Well, I don't want that to be embedded in my resin, so I'm panicking a little and taking resin away, and I realize, well, I've got to wipe underneath this now. Yeah. Totally came off, and I was now left with this skull floating in the larger mold with the poster tack still stuck to it. This inner skull has enough resin that it actually sunk to the bottom. The problem wasn't floating, the problem was sinking. At this point, I've done everything I can think of to try to salvage this. I spent about a decade trying to clean up all of this resin.
Three days later.
I finally got things cleaned up, so I used him to weigh down the silicone to keep everything flat. This worked way better than I thought. I had some resin on the lip of the mold, which I do end up taking off. I just use painter's tape when this kind of thing happens. I find it's the best thing to pick it up. Frankly, I was not expecting anything spectacular at this point. But it actually turned out looking really cool. It would have looked way cooler had all the lights not sunk to the top of the head. And it would have looked way cooler had there not been a bazillion micro bubbles inside. And also, I'm noticing here, you can't see the middle skull at all. You can definitely see the light string that was embedded in it though, so not how I wanted it to turn out, but still cool. Maybe I'll just say the light string looks like brains. It does look pretty cool though. Skully kiss. I cut very carefully around that string of lights. Yeah, after all the problems, you'd think I would have totally avoided getting anywhere near the wire with scissors, but I'm happy to report nothing happened. Obviously, the bottom of it isn't flush, but that flat part is enough of a base that it sits pretty sturdily. So that was good. And I do think I'm going to put it on a base. Yeah, you can blame Mr. Kitschy for that joke. Don't come for me. All in all, I think it turned out really cool though. I'm excited to try this again in a different way, and hopefully I will have the resin fairies on my side next time. And you can see here the skull matches the jar on my countertop, which also matches the deep purple in the granite. Let me know what you think in the comments. I hope you liked the video. If nothing else, it was a good laugh. Thanks so much for watching. Take care, my kitschy cats and kittens, and I'll see you soon.